Welcome to Strange Horizon, a brand new YouTube show exposing the evidence associated with the biggest mystery humans have ever confronted. A mystery echoed by the simple question, are we alone? But to answer that question, you don't have to necessarily look above in the high heavens and search for the elusive evidence of UAP, more commonly known as UFO. Many historians and ufologists familiar with the ancient alien theory will point out that some of the more enigmatic monuments that litter our planet still inexplicable in how it was engineered, and that often was associated with these sky gods, does exactly that. There is an abundance of establishment scientists that will say that the Great Pyramids of Giza is just a tomb built by an overzealous pharaoh. But what they too easily discount is the incredible coincidences that make it seem near impossible for humans to have fabricated alone. If not for the building themselves, the schematics, the plans behind the madness. A madness that seems it can only be derived from a genius mind that we have yet to understand in full. In a recent episode, we discussed the incredible fact that the Egyptians provided humanity with the measurements of the mile, as well as the sexagesimal system, a numerical system that is based in 60 and that to this day is still used to measure time and space. Now, if you're not certain what I mean, well, you experience it basically every time you go on Google Earth. It's the geographical coordinate system that you plug in, as well as every time you glance at your watch. Both time and space being denoted by the bases of 60 seconds and 60 minutes to equate to either 1 hour of time or a single degree of geographical distance. But it's not necessarily the high divisibility of the number 60 that impressed me with the system. It's how it anchors astronomical connections to Earth itself. For example, there's 1080 degrees in an octagon, which just magically happens to be the exact radius of the moon. How many seasons do we have? Well, 4, composed of 3 months each. How many ages do we have in a zodiac calendar? 12. How many hours in half a day? 12, which is not only 1/5 of the number 60 base system, it's also the amount of months we have in a year. 12 zodiac signs, 12 hours between the sun and the moon, and 12 months in a year. Now take that 4 seasons number and multiply that number by the radius of the moon. 4 times 1080 equals 4,320. Now I've gone over this in a very recent episode, but just to kind of rehash for the people who may not have seen that episode, how many seconds are there in 12 hours? Well, just add a 0 to that number. It's 43,200. How many minutes are there in a 30-day month? Well, it's 43,200. And what is the radius of the sun? Okay, I'm going to make it easy for you. Just add another 0. 432,000 miles. Now, if this has not become obvious to you yet, I'll give you one more that is bound to put a wrench in your skepticism. How many pyramids must you stack up to go from the equator of Earth to the North Pole? In other words, the polar radius of Earth. It's exactly 43,200. Oh, but yeah, with all those celestial connections, and given that modern scientists are still not sure what the hell the pyramid's function really is, yeah, I should just believe that it's all, ancient humans that somehow figured out the celestial calculations to create a number system that connects so neatly to our most important celestial bodies, including the sun and the moon, that just so happens to look the exact same size from our perspective. And good job on the pyramids, by the way, because it matches perfectly, not 43,201, not 42,999, it's 43,200 exactly to amount to the polar radius of Earth if you go by NASA's geodetic satellite measurements. Some respected researchers like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson believe that maybe an advanced past society was responsible for all of this. Given that so many people, including astronauts, are witnessing crafts that are maneuvering in ways that seem to defy the physics as we know it, I believe the answer is simpler than something that we have yet to prove, which is some kind of universal, highly technological society that spread its information to basically every culture of the world. I mean, just look up and look at the UFOs. And if you've never seen one in your lifetime, just grab a newspaper and read about what many government systems are saying nowadays, starting with the Belgian Air Force admission in 1992 and ending with the US Navy claiming these crafts are real in 2022. There seems to be an agreement that there are intelligences flying in our modern skies that for whatever reason we don't recognize as being humans. So why the hell do so many scientists assume that all the mysterious monuments that we see today, many which are unexplainable even in its basic function, let alone how it was engineered, have to be engineered by man with no outside help whatsoever? Not even when man dedicated these monuments to the sky god themselves. And let me just clarify that when I say making it, it doesn't have to be that they are physically putting the blocks together. It can be a little bit more abstract, like the knowledge that is required to create a system as perfect as the Sega system we still use today. So now that I got that out of the way, I wanted to quickly ask, what's the deal with Gobekli Tepe, one of the oldest megalithic sites we have ever discovered? If you have never heard of Gobekli Tepe, it's a site in Anatolia, Turkey that dates as far back as 12,000 years, possibly even more by some accounts. Now, just to put that in perspective how old that is, the Sumerians, previously thought to be the first civilization to invent a form of writing called cuneiform, is just as close to our modern times as the Sumerians are to Gobekli Tepe. The culture who built Gobekli Tepe, whoever they were, seems to defy most assumptions related to Paleolithic humans. A better example would be to state that it predates the invention of the wheel by 8,000 years. And if that seems a bit much to grasp, just think that it was before the Flintstones, basically. Previously, anything beyond 10,000 years was thought to be nothing more than brute cavemen who mostly grunted when communicating with their peers, and possibly pulled the woman they desire by the hair into their very dark, creepy caves. Okay, maybe that was a bit much. To the surprise of many experts, Gobekli Tepe turned those assumptions completely upside down. So is there anything unique about this culture that can suggest that our history was molded by something more than just humans alone? Well, I would be lying to you if I said that the evidence is clear. However, there are some interesting things to consider that may lean your perspective towards that direction. Outside of the sheer monstrosity of the site, meaning some of the megaliths actually weigh upwards of 50 tons, and there seems to be more than 20 individual sites constructed around the general vicinity, we also have to consider the manner to which this was built. The precision carvings that the engineers of this site created was not easy to do. In fact, that certain animals were carved not into the stone, rather the stone carved around the form of the animals itself is in orders of magnitude more difficult than just carving them into the stone. So why? What is the point of doing something as difficult as possible as opposed to the opposite? This is actually a common theme that I've been noticing with some sites. For example, in Lebanon, instead of using smaller bricks to build a foundation, some of the sites like Baalbek are known for having what is known as trilithons, blocks that weigh more than 1,000 tons each. And yes, I said that correctly. A block that's so heavy it would require 67 modern cranes to lift. But hey, no biggie. That seems like a normal behavior for an ancient people with supposedly no modern amenities such as plumbing. The point that I'm trying to make is that maybe there's different reasons why this is made to be as difficult as it can. Could it have to do with the same reason why culture on the opposite side of the world was doing the exact same thing? Now, if you've never seen this, check out some of these unbelievable connections with Gobekli Tepe and the Incan Empire, and actually even the Easter Island, courtesy of Hugh Newman's article and Graham Hancock's website. So, unless there's some kind of telepathic Jungian collective consciousness on steroids happening with these disparate cultures, something stranger seems to be afoot here. Something that would guide both cultures to create similar architecture in their monuments despite being on the opposite side of the world. Even if separated by thousands of years, you would then have to assume that this culture basically sailed around the entire world and then mysteriously turned Hispanic. I'm kidding, of course. I just don't think that the influence that they could have had short term would have been enough to create these unbelievable parallels. Now, if you want another cool example, this is actually one of those unique connections that you're likely to not encounter anywhere on the internet. I actually personally looked and I couldn't find it. Why is it that the Hopi Indians who talked about ants people who apparently aided them with building caves to protect them from a fire in the sky in the long winter, have near identical architecture complexes to the Dogon people of West Africa, who claimed that their gods not only came from the Sirius star system, but also taught them all the mathematical and metallurgical knowledge that they currently possess. Strange, right? Especially when you consider that the Dogon people knew that the Sirius star system was a trinary star system as recorded by French anthropologists in the 1920s, with one star being highly dense. Potolo is what they called it, which directly translates to seed star or atom star. And yes, they had a term for atom, surprisingly enough. So not only is the white dwarf in the Sirius star system basically invisible to the perspective of a telescope even by today's standards, it wasn't until the 1990s that organizations like NASA were able to mathematically calculate via solar perturbations detected in the Sirius star system that indeed this is a trinary star system, with one star being a highly dense white dwarf. Though it seems random to compare what is happening in Turkey to the aforementioned Dogon-Hopi connection, there's actually a lot of hidden layers to dissect here. One of the strangest coincidences is that only 200 miles away from Gobekli Tepe is a site called Cappadocia, Turkey, which is known for having mysterious underground living habitats, some which can hold upwards of 20,000 people. That's right. For some mysterious reason, the ancients of that area decided to engineer underground cities, which experts still debate how this was even feasible. Strangely enough, their religious texts, specifically the Zoroastrian texts, discuss how underground caves was built from the orders of their god Ahura Mazda to help escape from, get this, a long winter. Just like the Hopi Indians. And let me add that the Hopi Indians also made very explicit the divinity of the plan itself, meaning they didn't build those caves. Rather, it was what they called the ant people, or ant friends is another term that they give. And to top all of that with a little cherry on top, I should add that the Hopi word for ants is Anu, whereas the Hopi word for friend is Naki, which means ant friend directly translates to the word Anunnaki. Sounds familiar? Well, yeah, I mean, if you're familiar with the ancient alien theory, that's the same word that the Sumerians used for their sky gods who descended from the heavens to the surface of Earth. Now, if you think that this must be some lottery chance coincidence, let me add a little icing to the top of that cherry. I discovered by accident, and I don't know if anyone else has made this connection on the internet, but if you look at the actual map where the cometary fragments landed from the asteroid that struck Earth around 10,900 BC in Greenland, major cometary fragments mysteriously seem to have landed near the Cappadocia Gobekli Tepe region, as well as near New Mexico, the home state of the Hopi Indians. So my next question is simple. If both cultures built caves prior to a comet striking at the exact locations they inhabited, prior to a long winter that might have been set off by the comet, aka the Younger Dryas, and all of this can be verified via cometary fragments, religious text fables, and the actual caves themselves, what human society was capable of warning these different cultures to build underground habitats to protect themselves from a cometary or asteroidal strike that was going to happen? Comets or asteroids, I don't care what it was, by definition they are extraterrestrial, so the knowledge of their existence and where they would strike would require a knowledge foundation that is anchored to an extraterrestrial source. To me, it's just basic logic at this point. But we're actually not even done with all these connections. You see, the Dogon people talked about frog-faced gods who came from the sky that they called nomos. The Hopi Indians discussed lizard people. They built these little kachina dolls to represent them, as well as the ant people, alien abduction victims who have claimed to have come across greys and what is termed reptilians, are almost certainly wagging their fingers to the monitor saying, "I told you." But outside of the gods themselves, outside of the fact that Dogon people claim that their sky gods provided them mathematical and metallurgical knowledge, and outside of the fact that the Egyptians have strange unexplained monuments, there is still a common thread we have yet to connect. And that is the Sirius star system. The same star that the Egyptians worshipped and that the Dogon people of West Africa claimed that it was a trinary system decades prior to NASA, which is where their sky gods, as I said earlier, nomos, came from. It just happens to be the exact star system that apparently the people of Gobekli Tepe worshipped. Then I was like, wait a second, this is a bit much. If the Dogon people were taught metallurgical knowledge, which they said was gifted to them by these apparent gods from the Sirius star system, why is it that the people of Gobekli Tepe were not given the same thing despite worshipping the same star? I mean, all the experts are basically telling me that this site was chiseled with basic stone tools and that the whole site predates the wheel and even pottery itself. So I did a quick search on Google to see what the oldest evidence of metallurgy comes from, and this is when I realized how many experts are actually full of shit. Would you believe me if I told you that the oldest evidence of copper making occurred less than 75 miles away from Gobekli Tepe itself in a site called Cayönü Tepesi, and that this site's existence actually overlapped the Gobekli Tepe's existence as much as 1500 years in some estimations, and I'm supposed to assume that one is not connected with the other? Oh man, do I smell eagle shit? I mean ego bullshit. Why is it that a small YouTuber with a basic search engine at his disposal, who's not even all that specialized in this type of work, has to be the one who points out these very basic observations and connections? Really, I'm kind of flabbergasted by the sheer incompetence of the people who insist that Gobekli Tepe was entirely made from stone tools alone, when in only 1.5 days trip on a horse would take the ancient people of Gobekli Tepe to a site that actually had metallurgy. Oh, there's something else I discovered that might actually leave you speechless. Gobekli Tepe is also famous for a stone pillar called the vulture stone, which many experts believe actually depicts the comet strike in Greenland, as we discussed earlier. Some researchers at the University of Edinburgh in the UK discovered that the stone pillar seems to showcase zodiac symbols that indicated a certain pattern of stars, which included the vulture itself, which in that area was actually synonymous with the Cygnus constellation. This is something that the Armenians also used to represent the Cygnus constellation. And they also had other signs like the scorpion underneath that represented the Scorpio constellation. These researchers discovered that this star map is an exact match for the time of 10,950 BC, which is almost exactly when the comet is estimated to have struck Greenland. Now, when I saw this connection, I actually remember the controversial findings of geologist Professor Robert Schoch, who actually claimed that the Egyptian Sphinx has to be much older due to weather erosion, and he actually claimed that it might be over 10,000 years old at least, because that's the last time that Egypt had that much rain. So just for fun, I decided to go to an astronomy star mapping site, and I plugged in 10,950 BC, the date that Gobekli Tepe's pillar indicates, as well as the location of Cairo, Egypt, and last but not least, facing east, because that's the direction that the Sphinx is facing. Now take a look at what star constellation pops up right after sundown. Ladies and gentlemen, it would be tough for me to say that this is all some big meaningless coincidence that the star constellation of Leo magically rises where the lion-shaped Sphinx faces. And talking about lions, in Gobekli Tepe I uncovered some very unusual figurines. One that is a totem pillar that apparently has a lion face and snakes on its sides. Now this might seem like an abstract symbol, that is, until you look at the Babylonian mother goddess Ishtar, who is protected by lions and stands on top of a snake. Now what I love about the symbology is that it not only explains the meaning of the Masonic Statue of Liberty, or as the Romans would call this goddess Cybele, it's also a derivative of something that looks completely, and dare I say, extraterrestrial. This is the Sumerian Inanna, who is the predecessor to the Babylonian Ishtar, which I might add is also connected to the Jewish Lilith, who in many ancient scriptures was said to be talking serpents that gave Eve the forbidden fruit of knowledge, and is explicitly described in some ancient scriptures as being initially offered to Adam, as if like Eve is human and this other thing is quintessentially not human. This lion-serpent juxtaposition is also seen with some figures associated with the mystery Roman religion of Mithra, which to this day has no surviving scriptures, as well as symbols used to depict dragons. which can be seen in the Chinese lion dragon. Now, I should also add that the Mithra lion seems to be standing on top of a globe, or at least it looks like one. And the Kabbalistic teachings associated with the marriage of Samuel and Lilith is apparently arranged by what they call a blind dragon. And lastly, the beast of Revelations who spoke like a dragon is said to have a serpentine body and the face of a lion. And what is one of the most common attributes of dragons outside of them being incredibly intelligent? Well, it's that they come from other worlds. Weird that a culture that is 12,000 years old would make the same lion-serpent connection. And now take a look at this figurine, also found in Gobekli Tepe, which some have actually humorously termed the Watchers. Lastly, I discovered this figurine, but what I found to be interesting is that there was a culture 900 miles away in Kosovo that was at least 8,000 years old, which is 2,000 years after Gobekli Tepe, but predates the Sumerian Empire by 2,500 years, and could actually be the first cultures to exhibit writing. And similar to that site adjacent to Gobekli Tepe, this culture was known for having copper. It was also one of the earliest sites for metallurgy. Now, I have no proof that there's a definitive connection, but if by chance it so happens that these European hunter-gatherers were connected, meaning the Vincas are descendants of the Gobekli Tepe hunter-gatherer society, just as the Olmecs are descendants of the Mayans, I wanted to now show you what the figurines of the Vincas look like. Strange? Yes, very strange indeed. Thank you so much for following me in this journey, an absolute labyrinth of discoveries. I definitely learned a lot researching for this episode, and I also want to thank producer Will Anderson and all the Patreon members, as well as the viewing audience for your support. I mean, honestly, you guys are a huge motivational factor when researching for these very difficult, desperate, and sometimes esoteric topics. As above, so below. This is Felipe speaking, signing out.